We all know the famed Jedi killer and butcher Grievous, but what do we know about his name? Surely this could not be his birth name. Greetings again, disciples of the Force, and welcome back to the archives. The Jedi genociding droid general seemingly appeared out of nowhere during the Clone Wars, unveiled as the Separatists' greatest weapon. Grievous would cut a swath through the ranks of the Jedi despite not wielding the Force at all. He was a monster, the only being that could utterly terrify the Knights of the Republic. Even when the Jedi attempted to dig into his origins of this strange creature that they had come across, they came up with very little. That was until Kit Fisto infiltrated the lair of Grievous and came across the strange shrine to a warlike alien heritage, a mirror into the past. It was here when the Jedi and the Republic learned that there was much more to this cybernetic monster than met the eye. He was once a proud warrior, but was now totally taken with revenge, rage, bloodlust. We all know that Grievous wasn't always the bizarre amalgamation of droid parts and sinew, but his name was not always Grievous. He wasn't always a man in perpetual grieving with the desire to cause even more grief. So what made this man decide to change his name, to throw away everything that used to give him pride, hope, love? Well, for that, we must open a holocron and go all the way back to the beginning of the General's deepest roots. The story of General Grievous's origins are told to us thankfully in the Star Wars Insider magazine and the strange graphic novel, Star Wars Visionaries. These weave a tale of a man born of wild space in the world of Kali. This was a world torn by famine and war, as the native reptilian Kalish battled endlessly against the insectoid species known as the Yamri. Untouched by galactic justice all the way out in wild space, the Kalish had been embroiled in the Huck War for generations. The Huck was a name that the Kalish had given their ancient enemy, although the rest of the Republic knew them as the Yamri. This was passed down as a slur meaning the soulless bugs. This was because the Huck, they were extremely cannibalistic, but technologically advanced as well, and had decided to start taking over neighboring worlds, reaching deep for their resources. What mattered to them was wealth, mineral deposits, or useful forms of trade. They specifically preyed on planets that were less developed than they were, which brought them to the Kalish. The world didn't exactly have any natural resources, except for one thing: its people. The insectoid deeply coveted the Kalish to sell as slaves. It was not long before the prideful and spirited Kalish people rebelled against the invasion of the outsiders, waging a war with their primitive weapons, using the Lig swords, or the Shawnee spears, and slug throwers. For those of you that may not know, a slug thrower is the name that the citizens of the galaxy use to refer to our world's guns. This was a non-blaster that was fired by physical projectiles, or slugs, largely used at the time in primitive or underdeveloped worlds that did not have access to blaster technologies, though some, such as the Mandalorians, chose to use slugs for certain inherent benefits that they provided, such as they were great at killing Jedi. But the Kalish people were such fine warriors that they were able to use their early weaponry to fight a good war against the Huck, and it would be in the midst of this conflict that this particular little boy would grow up, a boy that would be given the name Kaimain Jai Shilal. And he grew up to absolutely despise the invaders. His hatred was so strong that his father decided to help him vent his anger, teaching him how to use a slug rifle's pinpoint precision, teaching him to become a warrior. In doing so, he discovered that his son had a sharp mind and was an excellent marksman. By the age of just 8, Shilal was an expert sniper, and the boy had already claimed the lives of 40 Huck soldiers. By 22, Shilal's extermination count had soared, and the Kalish began to regard him as a demigod of sorts. Eventually though, his father would die in the war, and his precious Moo hunting mask would be passed down to Shilal. One night, Shilal had a dream in which he saw himself slaying a wild Moo within the Kunbal jungle using Lig swords. He was so taken by this vision that he went out to go find and kill one in reality. However, instead of finding a Moo in the jungle, he found a female of his species by the name of Randuru Lij Kumar. He then realized that the slayer in his dream had not been for himself, but for the woman standing before him, wearing a Karabakh skull mask, wielding twin Lig swords. From that moment on, the two became insanely close comrades, and their bond was inseparable. The legend of their meeting went down as a cryptic parable known as the Dreamer and the Dreamt One. Kumar drilled the art of swordsmanship into Shilal until he truly became the greatest warrior of his people. In turn, he introduced her to the satisfying feeling of the slug rifle. They would fight side by side in countless campaigns against the Huck invaders, hacking and impaling the enemy, sniping them from miles. Some believed that the Kumar was Shilal's long-lost half-sister. Others say that she was his lover, his wife. Nothing was ever confirmed about the two of them though. All that the people knew was that their bond was sacred, and they were considered twin demigods blessed by their ancestors. While fighting together, the pair seemed invincible. Fighting separately was a different matter though, and the day finally came when the dynamic duo would be separated in great combat on the beaches of Kali. Kumar would there die an undeservedly violent death, ripped apart by the Huck's natural appendages, barbed shears. They did not think that she was good enough for their technology, for their weaponry. She was a savage. She was far from a god, and she deserved to die far from a god. The Huck would throw her body into the Genua Sea. Shilal tried for hours, desperately attempting to reclaim her body from the water, but he ultimately failed. He then felt an anguish akin to being pierced through the gut, but instead of blood, his very soul seeped through the wound. He was inconsolable as he embarked on a perilous journey across the ocean to the distant island, a place known as the Monolith of Abesmi. There, he beseeched his gods to raise his loved one from the grave, begging to see her just one last time. But the gods were silent, and Shilal would try to bury his grief, taking upon him 10 wives and siring 30 sons and daughters. But the large family was nothing to him. He realized that it was his destiny to mourn the loss of his true love for all eternity. And so, with his grief, he was given a new name, a name which would fit his agonizing reality, represent a never-ending grief, a name to strike fear in the heart of the enemy. He would become Grievous, but along with this, he decided that he would not suffer in endless agony alone. Someone would pay. And that is how Grievous was given his name. It's incredibly sad to know that Shilal started as someone who had a righteous fury, and that he was an honorable warrior who strived for the freedom of his people above all else. But the thing that he loved most was taken from him, beginning with his father, and then his partner Kumar. But unfortunately, this would not be the last tragedy that Grievous would suffer. We plan on continuing our tragic tale in a future holocron, telling about how Grievous nearly wiped out the entirety of the Huck race, and what inspires his deep hatred for the Jedi. If you're eager to hear the rest of our story, then be sure to let us know down below. And also tell us, does it surprise you that the name Grievous came from what many could consider humble origins? And would you have liked to see his story told in a flashback episode of the Clone War? Or perhaps something else? Unfortunately in canon, all we get were very close references to the Kalish past, especially in the Lair of Grievous episode. But maybe one day in the future, perhaps in a Tales of the Sith series, they'll throw in the origins of the droid general, even if he's not technically a Dark Lord. But anyway, thank you so much for joining the archives today, and until our next entry, may the Force be with you.